Although I believe anyone can gain value from this lesson, you'll be able to most effectively apply the concepts we discussed today if you can already do the following. The first is that you can play your major, minor, and dominant 7th chords in root position. So your major, minor, dominant 7 chords, and you can also play your major, minor, and dominant 7th chords in versions. You can play that for all the 12 major, minor, and dominant chords. And then the last thing that will really help is if you have an understanding of voice leading around middle C. So if you can play a 2-5-1 progression like this, that's in the key of C, D minor to G to C. And let me know if you'd like a separate video covering these topics. I'd love to do that for you. So let's get into the next section of the video. I'm going to explain these chords using a 2-5-1 progression in C major. The chords here are D minor 7, G dominant 7, and C major 7. The 2-5-1 is also the best way for you to practice jazz chords after the video. So what I played for you with those 3 chords, they were all in root position. And we know that the chords are made up of 4 different notes: the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. Root, 3rd, 5th, 7th. In the jazz world, the 2 most important notes are the 3rd and 7th. Okay, so they actually define how the chord sounds. If we were to play 2-5-1 just with 3rds and 7ths, it would sound like this. If we were to play it just with 1st and 5ths, this is what it would sound like. You can't really tell how it sounds because we don't have those defining tones in the chords. So once you're comfortable finding the 3rd and the 7th across all your major, minor, and dominant 7th chords, let's take a look at some more possibilities. Let's go back to our D minor 7 chord, which was, and we're going to add an E on top. This is called the 9th. So this would be called a D minor 9 chord in root position. A 9th is actually just the 2nd E moved up an octave. And if we added the 11th, which would be G, that's a 4th up an octave. That would be a D minor 11th chord. So our D minor 9 chord, and then a D minor 11th chord. If we were going to play our 2nd chord in the inversion, the G7, the 9 would be A, and then we're going to play a 13. Take a minute, pause the video, and try to figure out what the 13 of a G dominant chord would be. Okay, thanks for joining me again. It would be E, right? Because if we have a 6th, a 13 is an octave above the 6th of the chord. That's G dominant 13 or G13. And then let's resolve back to the C major 7. And this time we're going to add a 9, which would be what note? D, right? 2nd, go up an octave. So let's play all that together. Sounds really pretty. I really recommend practicing your 2-5-1s over the song Sunday Morning by Maroon 5. It has a 2-5-1 progression that repeats. It's really nice to play along to if you're looking for a backing track. So now that we figured out some of the different color tones we can use, a color tone is not the 3rd and the 7th. It's not these, it's not the root. It's using the 5th, the 9th, or the 13th, or the 6th. So it's all those other notes that we can throw in that make chords sound jazzier. Okay, now that you know the notes in these chords, let's talk about how to play them in a jazz context. Unless you're playing solo piano, most of the time you'll have a bass player, and in this case, he or she will be hitting the root notes. Therefore, you don't need to play the octave root in the left hand. A lot of players play piano like this. Right? With a bass player, they're actually playing those low notes. So it's not only unnecessary for you to play them, it can actually get in their way and clutter up the overall sound since you're doubling them. So let's get rid of the root. We don't have to play the root anymore, and that'll free up our fingers to play other notes. So let's start with rootless voicings. So like I said, we don't have to play the root anymore. So let's go back to our D minor 7. We're taking off the root, so we're not playing those. And the most important notes are our 3rd and 7th. So let's get rid of our 5th for now. And let's figure out how we want to voice this. And voicing is just where we play it on the piano. So I don't want to play it this high. I'm actually going to move the C down here. Still have the 3rd and 7th, except the 7th is on the bottom. And then I'm going to put in the 9th, or the 2, right here. And I'm going to add back the 5th. And this would be called a rootless voicing, D minor 9. And this is really helpful for improvising because you can have this chord in the left hand. You'll be able to, play different lines. So you can mess around in the right hand with just having your left hand voicing. So now let's go to the G dominant 7 chord. Let's add some color tones. So what I'm first going to do is find my 3rd and 7th right here. And then I'm going to add my 9 and my 5. Same with the D minor 9 chord. So it'd be, next is our C major 7. I find my 3rd and my 7th, which is B and E. I'm going to add my 9, and then I'm going to add my 5. So let's put it all together. Really nice. So again, have some fun trying to improvise over the white keys in your right hand as you play these notes. So that's a rootless voicing. It's a one-hand voicing in your left hand. And try to figure out other color tones that are fun to use. Again, don't use everything at once. It's kind of like drawing or painting. You don't want to use every color because you eventually just end up with a black canvas. I like to think of it like that. You're just trying to add some color, and you want to have purpose in every note that you play. So the next section is going to be two-hand voicings. Sometimes this is called comping over a solo. If a saxophone player, trumpet, guitar is soloing, you're going to want to be able to use two hands to figure out a chord. A very famous two-hand voicing is called the drop two voicing. One of the most famous jazz pianists, Bill Evans, uses it in his song Waltz for Debbie. Let me give you an example of what he does as he goes into the A section. See, it sounds really pretty, and I'm going to explain how to do this. So let's go back to our D minor 7, except we're going to get rid of the root, and we're going to use the 9 instead. So we're going to voice it like that at first, and we know we don't want to play it like this. We're going to play it a different way. So we have our 3, 5, 7, 9. We're going to drop the second note from the top. That's why it's called a drop two voicing. So if you're playing it like this, you're going to drop the C down an octave and play it like that. Before we had this chord, we're going to drop our B down an octave. And then before we had this, drop our B down an octave again. So let's see how that would sound with a drop two voicing. Really smooth voice leading. There wasn't a lot of jumping around. When you first learn piano, it's easy to play chords like this. But see how smooth that other version was? So that's a drop two voicing. I really recommend that as kind of an entry to learning two-hand voicings. They sound great, and you can use them in so many different ways. So also a side note, chords sound the most rich and full around middle C. So that's where you're going to be hanging out in the jazz setting, because you've got the bass covered here, you've got a trumpet up here, and some other horns. So your kind of range, just think of the piano as kind of chopped off up here. You're going to focus right here, unless you're soloing. Then you can work up the piano. And again, if you're playing solo piano, it's all yours. Use the whole keyboard. But in a jazz combo setting, you're really going to want to stick to these middle two octaves when you're playing behind other people. As a side note, if you are playing solo, a trick to figure out some voicings to play is to start with the root, because you don't have a bass player anymore. So let's try just a quick way to do that. In our same progression, 2, 5, 1, and C, we've got our root, our 3rd and 7th. Then we go to our G, which would be our root, 3rd and 7th, or 7th and 3rd, excuse me. And then we've got our root, 3rd and 7th. So it would sound like this. So my hands are average size, so it's hard for me to reach that. So if you find that you can't reach a 10th very well, that's what this is called, 10th interval, you can stagger it. So go like this. That's what the sustain pedal is helpful for. So that's how you'd play solo piano in the left hand. Again, you could play something up here as you go down. Okay, so those are some jazz voicings. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them in the comments below, and good luck.